What do you think, Harvey? Should we get into it?
I'm ready, man.
All right, let's do it. So, welcome to Studio Visit with Raven, episode 1. I'm excited to be here. Thank you all for coming and joining. And I have a fantastic guest who I've known for a while to kick this off. So I'd like to just go ahead and give a little intro. Harvey Rayner is an English artist and creative coder with over 25 years of digital and generative art practice. He attended the City and Guilds of London Art School and has had a diverse creative career working as a designer, inventor, programmer, and business owner while maintaining a dedicated daily art practice. In more recent years, Harvey has been selected by the Art Bloc's curation board for his project Fontana and has had successful solo exhibitions with Bright Moments in Verse. Harvey lives in upstate New York with his wife of 25 years. He has 2 adult children, is a keen rock climber, and has maintained a daily meditation practice for over 20 years. And, I also count him as a friend, a good friend that I've met in this space and have always enjoyed talking to. So it's easy when you have, friends that you can just talk to and do things like this. So welcome, Harvey.
Well, thanks for having me, man. Really, it's a privilege to be on your first show. And looking forward to chatting with you. It's always a good conversation.
Awesome.
And a great intro. Thanks for that.
Sure. So I thought we'd get started just with going way back. I'd love to hear your background. Obviously you're from England. Could you maybe tell us, I don't think I've heard this before, what was kind of where you got started, where you grew up, and then any early, were you creative growing up, that kind of thing, or was it kind of something you developed later? Would love to hear kind of the early days of Harvey.
Okay, yeah, I'll try to sort of maybe reveal things I don't normally reveal on podcasts. Keep it a little different. Okay, so, I see one of my very first memories, like preschool, 2, 3, was painting 2 pictures. In England we call it play school. It's not preschool, and so I was probably 3. I may have even been I can't imagine I was 2, but I distinctly remember painting these 2 pictures, and one I really liked. They were both scribbles, basically, and one I was devastated by. I hated it, so I screwed it up and hid it under a chair. And either my mom or whoever was running the play school kind of found it, and then kind of opened it up and said, "No, you trying to tell me that it was good," and I knew it wasn't. And I remember that was this probably my first clear memory. So obviously it's always been making images and having a strong sense of what I like and don't like has always been with me. I'd spend most of my childhood, my free time playing with Lego, or drawing, or I didn't really get into painting until I was a teenager, but I was always drawing these monsters and different things. Technical drawing, I did a lot of kind of drawing cars, things like that. But it's been with me right from the start. I've never had a period where I've not kind of made visual creative things. The only period was when I spent 6 months kind of traveling, but it's just been a daily thing for me since. So it was never a time where it begun. It was just it seemed like I was born that way. I think even before preschool, I was as soon as I could do jigsaw puzzles, I was just absorbed with making jigsaw puzzles and would do that all day.
Yeah.
And where I grew up in a little town called Lowestoft. Well, it's 50,000 population. Lowestoft, east coast of England, most easterly point on the whole isle. So on the coast.
Wow. And, obviously you growing up, you attended art school. So you had this early interest in it. It seems like you stuck with it, through your adolescence, and you actually went to school for art. What did you go to school for in art school? What medium, or did you have a medium?
Yeah, Well, I went for fine art painting. An interesting little story here. I actually got rejected from art school twice, and it was because I actually was sort of like I produced so much work even when I was like 14, 15, 16, and I figured I could skip what they called the foundation year in England. So I figured I could finish my A levels and go straight to university and study art, which kind of backfired on me because although they really liked my work and they were impressed, I had like this amazing interview, and I figured I'd go in, and then sure enough, I got a letter to say I've been rejected, and I was totally devastated. But in the end, it turned out for the best because I ended up applying to a private school, City and Guilds London Art School, which was actually by far the better school, but it was just the only university still open at the time. So I managed to get a spot in there. Yeah.
And did you feel like you learned a lot at art school, or like did you feel like you developed an artistic practice there? Is the things you learned there, do you still use those, or do or have you kind of moved on from that? Just curious.
It's complicated, right? I think I actually, in some respects, I took a step backwards because I became so conceptual. But yeah, so prior to going to art school, I wasn't really, I'm not really intellectual now, but like I wasn't exposed to a lot of thought. Like I had never read any philosophy or art theory or, art history. So I was kind of quite sort of simple and just very sort of like intuitive and free. I would produce a lot of different styles, and I could look at different styles of different artists and kind of like recreate what I saw fairly kind of like just intuitively. And then when I went to art school, I started to think about everything and read a bunch. And I had some tutors who really sort of made a big impression on me, and they introduced me to all kinds of different kind of ideas. And it was kind of like a difficult period in the sense I just got lost in my head. And the work I did at art school, I don't think it's my best work, but I think it's just a period, that many artists go through, and it was valuable in hindsight. You've got to kind of go through it and come out the other side, in a sense. So I think I spent the next 5 to 10 years in kind of like unlearning everything I learned at art school, and kind of like getting out of my head and getting more back into my gut and feeling my way back in art. So, but I wouldn't. I actually did quit. I done a year and I quit. I got full scholarship for the rest of the 3 years, and I quit because I just found, not because I didn't like it, I just couldn't work in that environment. I like to work by myself, and I go into math and geometry and stuff, and it just I was going and doing live drawing and what have you, and it didn't seem like the right space to explore those new ideas. So I just crazily just figured I'll just do my own thing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So even back then, you were starting to kind of also develop, the kind of hard sciences that, generative art, is you kind of need for it, right? Like, or at least helps you a lot in generative art. So you had that dual interest, it sounds like, back then, right? Would you say that's true?
Yeah. When I done my A levels in England, in England you can choose 3 subjects from 16 to 18 and just focus on them. And I chose technology, mathematics, and art. And so that were the subjects I kind of I was drawn to. And what it was at art school, I was painting, but to me it just felt like I couldn't possibly ever make an original painting. Not really. It just felt like the medium was exhausted. And for me, to have a chance at making an original mark or anything, I had to kind of like. To me, it just seemed like, okay, I can do this potentially with geometry, because that is under kind of like explored. And I kind of imposed these incredibly sort of like strict kind of, I call it meter at the time, like these strict kind of rule sets and sort of geometric grammar on myself for many, many years. So, and as a way to try and actually just make something original. Yeah, and I actually worked in black and white for like without any color or texture for like maybe it was even 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think in also like on the on the art school side, and you said you're too much in your head, that kind of thing. I'd be curious to think like how much you think artists or budding artists or artists that are learning should be looking towards the past and historical work and those quote unquote masterworks, and also that's one way to kind of do it versus like approaching it more intuitively. Like, how do you feel about that? And do you think they're both important? I'm just curious on your take on that.
Right. I will say, like, when I went to art school, I not only was I introduced to the world of thought, I went to a lot of galleries and I was exposed to art history, and so I see that as something different. I developed this sort of love for the past and studying the work of the artists have come before, and that's still a passion I have today. I think every artist is different. They're going to find a different way to, part of being an artist is finding your own path. So I don't think it's critical, but for me, it's been really valuable. And I think a lot of it is about kind of like getting a sense for like quality, like the best kind of like the highest quality that humans have achieved in art. And I think like still the fundamental like challenges of making art are still. Sorry, I'm just having to deal with my dog here. So yeah, I think the fundamental problems of making good art are still the same today as what they were 1,000 years ago. So it's just like this like to not go back there and look at the past is like, I feel like maybe it's a resource you're not tapping. It's a resource of inspiration, but also just like seeing how like other artists work with things like composition and so forth, and I often I'll go back repeatedly and just look at certain artists from the past and get ideas for new works, and just enjoy it. It's just like but it's funny enough, one of the art teachers who really like I developed a strong friendship with, he always used to say, never look at your contemporaries. So
that's funny.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if I agree with him, but I do know what he means. It's like it's so easy to get seduced by new things, right? And you don't necessarily like the new it hasn't gone through this filter of kind of like time. So you can get seduced by sort of like very sort of seductive things, and the underlying sort of like composition and structure, the sort of things that survive for people can still understand, say 50, 100 years later. It's you don't necessarily like when what am I saying? But those things take longer to reveal themselves, like so. And we don't always see that in the contemporaries. But having said that, I look at a lot of my contemporaries, especially obviously in gen art.
Yeah, exactly. I think I know what you're saying. Like too, like over a long period of time, there's a filter, right? Because the best works are going to they're going to be timeless, right? So as time goes on, the ones that remain. The works that remain in the public consciousness are going to be of high quality usually, right? Because they've stuck around for so long. So I think that's what, at least when I look at it, I'm like, if things have been around for a while and people are still talking about them, then you got to pay attention because there's something there, right?
Right.
Definitely. When did you start doing more generative art, like and even more specifically, like computer, with code generative art?
Right. Okay. Yeah. This is another funny story. Actually, I was really resistant to using a computer, and I was just not just for making art, but just using one in general. Like I was like, Luddite. I think it was like around 2001 that my wife bought a computer, and I'm like, I don't want nothing to do with that. and I was making art with sort of like geometric, like with a compass and rule basically, and I was drawing all out, and sometimes I was painting, sort of filling
Yeah.
simplicity, sort of filling shape.
Were you using before the computer, were you using a generative process to do that? Or was it just, you were just kind of using a compass and ruler to just draw shapes? Or did you have a actual like, some sort of generative process to like,
Right.
with randomness or something like that would, yeah.
No, it wasn't. Other than just this kind of randomness, I think every artist's axis is just in there with their own intuition and kind of, no, it wasn't. No, it was, but it was kind of a strange way of working. It was kind of a very structured. I'd explore these geometric relationships, and the work would grow out of these geometric relationships. Like, and there'd be no part of the composition which didn't belong to that geometry set. So it wasn't like there was no sort of arbitrary marks. I wasn't like using geometry to structure a composition. I was actually like, the fabric of the work itself was the geometry. So it was kind of it was quite an unusual way of working. It was similar to generative coding in the sense that it was very structured and very well defined, and there were certain things I could and couldn't. I saw certain rules I created which I couldn't violate in any way. So yeah, it wasn't generative, but it had similarities.
Yeah. And then, so when did you start to actually, you said you got the computer and you were resistant towards it at first. And then what did you start thinking? Hey, like, like I actually can build things with this. Like maybe it's not so bad.
Right. It was sort of more a necessity because the work I was doing was kind of like, it was like modular. I would build like a motif, this geometric motif, and then a year later I'd build another one. And it started off very simple. And then, but these things I'd find every few months, I'd find a different way to like combine these pieces. And it kind of grew, the complexity grew exponentially. I used to think of it like Moore's Law. So it got to a point where I couldn't, like, to create these things would just take me forever. So I figured I've got to use a computer. So it was like I'd made the decision before I even touched it, and I started to use it. And of course, I was just drawing things and scanning them in, and I was using it all in the wrong way. Then eventually, I kind of started to use vector. I used Corel Draw, and I used sort of like an equivalent of a compass and rule just in Corel Draw. And then that kind of like I was doing that for like 10 years from there, and all that became my kind of like my basic tool. But then I was sort of slowly learning to code, just to make websites, just very basic things just to show my work. Not that anybody ever saw it, but like, and then I would say it was like 2008, some reason. I think 2008. I was sharing my website, and I was as a spin-off from this geometric work, I was making these sort of like seamless pattern tiles. It wasn't really the art, but it was just this thing that people seemed to like, and people would put them in their MySpace backgrounds, back in the day when you, and people would often ask, can you do this one in blue? They'd be much more popular than my actual artwork. Nobody's really interested in the art, but they love these patterns. So I figured, well, wouldn't it be nice if I had some utility where you could change the colors and maybe change the size and just download it as a seamless tile? And nobody had built that at that point. I figured I'm going to learn how to do this. So I started watching some JavaScript, tutorials, and I basically taught myself to code with this project. And it went through several iterations, and it became, this thing called patterncooler.com. It's still there, but I think the secure certificate just ran out. But it's still there, and you can download the patterns and everything, and it became quite a sophisticated tool, and it became very popular, and then it kind of led me to, like, I'd get startups who would approach me and say, look, we've got this company that makes dresses, for instance, and we want people to make customizable patterns to go on the dresses or cushions or whatever. Can you help us? So I'd done that for a number of years, just working as a freelance kind of SVG pattern UI specialist.
Wow. So that's brings up a good point. I'm glad you brought up SVG because one thing I learned recently that I didn't know is did you actually create the SVG logo? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, they announced it because I was still, before they'd got a logo even, I was involved with them. Because I don't actually remember how I ended up using SVG because it didn't have like cross browser support. It worked in Chrome, but it didn't even work in Internet Explorer. You had to use this kind of like patch built by Google to make it work. So and they announced that they were running a competition to design a logo, and that was just like the first competition I had ever entered, and I won. So, and this is another funny story. I actually won a phone. Like this, it's back before smartphones, but this phone was quite an expensive phone. It was like $800 phone, and I had it a day, and I put it in my pocket. And my wife put my pants in the washing machine and killed it. But although apparently it was my fault, I left it in my pocket and put them out to be washed. But yeah, so I didn't really get anything from winning other than the kudos of winning.
Yeah. So, you and I want to talk about SVG a little bit more because one thing that I know, just from talking to you and things like that in your generative art practice, when the first time I heard it, I was like pretty surprised is that, you basically, at least, the projects you've done more recently, and it sounds like, even before then, you, basically are building SVG for like all your projects and even how complicated they are. I think, if there are any, people that do generative art in the space or things like that will know that most people, will just use HTML5 canvas or, some other way to kind of create the visual layer, of how to actually draw on the browser, but you actually create, do it all with SVG, which is pretty unique, I would say. I haven't heard of many other people doing that outside of something maybe like plottables where it's something specific where it's going to be plotted. So I'm curious you're thinking about that and like, why do you do that?
Yeah, okay. Should I actually just explain just for the listeners, just a brief overview? So SVG stands for Scalable Vector Graphics, and I think probably most people know what vector graphic is. There's two main types of graphics really on the internet. I mean, there's bitmaps or raster files, which are just like pixels, and you open them up in Photoshop and what have you. And like a photograph is digital photograph, it's a bitmap, and then you've got vector graphics, which so all the lines and colors and everything are all stored as kind of like equations basically, and that means you can open them up at any size and print them at any size. But so SVG was this format created so you could display vector graphics on the internet. Prior to that, I think it was Flash. People probably remember Flash for a bit, but SVG just kind of like took that function. And Google Maps is SVG. That's something that people all know, but it's usually used for like clip art kind of and things like that. So it's not designed to do this, like have like necessarily tens of thousands of layers of the stuff on top of each other. So I got, it's just because I was involved in it, I guess, and that's why I knew that I started to use it. I've always sort of like just trying to use what I know rather than, I'm not somebody who likes to keep learning new technologies for the sake of it. I know there are a lot of coders like that who are just constantly moving from one language to the next.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think a lot of people get caught up with that. I think, generative artists, even when, I learned to code and people learn to code, I think there's this temptation to just get so caught up with the tools, right? And without actually making anything, right? or learning really much.
Right.
It's like people will start one programming language and say, oh, they'll Google, okay, what's the most popular programming language? Oh, it's Python. And, so then they'll ask you, should I learn Python? And then they'll start learning Python, and they'll read an article that says, oh, Python is dead, you should learn JavaScript. Right. And now they're switching to JavaScript, and they just get burned out because like they're just switching between these tools, and I could see the same thing with art, generative art, right? Like you started with, one thing, and then you see another tutorial that someone doing Canvas, and then, even technique wise, right? Like people are like, oh, I don't know shaders. I need to learn shaders before I like really release anything, or some other technique, right? And I think I agree with you that like you just have to start with doing with what you got, right? Like you just start putting things out there, right? Like I think this is just something more general too in any type of art, of kind of, even music. I think like, I obviously do, I do some guitar and things like that. And I always found that like when you do instruction and stuff, it's, basically like they start you off with these like, traditional instruction. They start you off with these like really long things that you have to do before, like that you have to kind of master before you even put anything out there for someone to experience. And right. It's like, that's the point of making any type of art, whether it's cooking or generative art, or visual art, or anything, right? Is getting your stuff out there and making it. So it's, you got to shorten that feedback loop.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of people who aren't coders don't realize there are kind of like trends within code to learn certain frameworks. And I always like ask, well, what is this really going to give me more than what I already can do, Because the other thing with coding, a lot of people don't realize, if you're not a coder, there's always like 1,000 ways to solve the same problem, right? You can, so, why not just stick with what you know? And I think also it comes from like, I see code, like, I don't think I'm a natural coder. I think I've got very proficient at what I do, but I don't come from, coding was always just a way for me to solve art problems and realize the art I wanted to make. So it's just a tool for me to do the things I'm already clear about in my mind, what I want to do. So it just happened that, I knew SVG for various other reasons, and it just evolved from there. I guess I knew the type of art I wanted to explore, and rather than spending a year learning something else, I think, well, I'll just see if I can do it with SVG, and let's just keep continuing. It's like, oh, I can do this with what I already do, right? And then the nice thing about that, it then evolves into something that is unique, that other people don't do, because you've gone through such a strange path to get there.
Yeah, exactly, and yeah. Like, and you're 100% right too, right? Like if you're following a lot of tutorials and things like that, at least in the beginning, that's important. But sometimes there's some real power in just finding a way to do it that's not, the main way, Yeah. And that's something I wanted to come back to. It's something that I've noticed with you, that even in this conversation, but also kind of our other conversations, is like you always seem to have a kind of a really drive to be original, and to do something that is new, novel, not groundbreaking, yes, but also just doing something that no one's done before. It seems like is a big driver for you. Where does that come from? Is that another thing that was just kind of you were born with, and or is that something you developed over time?
I think it's something that was there right from the start. Yeah, I think my mum used to despair, kind of like I always wanted to do things my own way, and even if it was the wrong way to do it, like in a different way. It's always been like I say, every artist is different, right? And we all have a different thing that drives. It's a different kind of like. But for me, it's like even if I've done it once before, I've just kind of like lost my interest in it straight away. As soon as I've done it once, I'm like, I can't do that again. To me, it's just like it's a part of creativity. It's not the whole thing, but it's just like making something that's never been conceived of before. It's just it's just where the juice is for me.
Me too.
Even they do it, but that's what I want to do. And it would, like, I think even back in the day when I was doing that if I was doing that when I was doing that sort of like very geometric based stuff, if I had just seen one other example of another artist doing something similar, I would have just quit. I would have quit. I dropped the whole thing and figured, okay, I've got to create something new here. And some of it may even come from like a deep insecurity of not wanting to compare like I've noticed for this project, the Chatfucker project, I'm not comparing myself in an unhealthy way. It feels quite liberating, but it's probably the first project I've done in Web3, which is, that different in many, many different ways. So it's kind of like, maybe it's also like, if you're doing something totally different to everybody else, then you can't, like I say, you can't compare yourself, and you can't be judged. So it might be an insecurity thing, deep down there somewhere. I think a lot of the things that drive us to be successful and do amazing things in life, actually stem from kind of like insecurities or just flaws,
Yeah. I agree. And, maybe that's in me too. Who knows? But I feel that same drive that, to make things that, are at least have a different spin on something I've done before or other people have done before. Right. And
sure.
If that spin's not there, or, I'm with you. I like want to quit and I'll just work on something else until it is there. Or I'll discover something and be like, man, like someone's already done this. Like there's something there for sure that I think I think most artists, or at least artists that we've kind of interact with, at least that I've talked to, kind of have that same drive. And it's pretty deep, like it's not a shallow drive.
Yeah.
I think and I definitely want to talk about Chatfucker, which is the best name in the world. We'll get there. But I wanted to first kind of talk about your entry into when I got familiar with your work, which was Photon's Dream on your first release on Art Blocks. I think it was one. I remember I was with Future, who Keith from Bright. Yeah, I think I was talking with him, and because I'm good friends with him, and we were talking, and we were kind of just looking at Art Blocks projects and stuff like that, and we came across yours, and it wasn't minted out yet, and we just both at the same time were just like, wow, this is really good. Like, no one's really paying attention to this, and this is some really good stuff. And yeah, and then we collected, I think you were doing something like you get 3 and you got a print and things like that. We got that, and you sent me a beautiful, huge print of mine, which is awesome. Yeah, just like, what was it like I'm just curious your take of like, what was it like to come into this Web3 space? And, after having that, I mean, I kind of started in this space. I did some messing around, but I really didn't have a real serious art practice before this space. And I'm just curious your take of having all this experience before. How has it been to just come into Web3 and crypto art, and how is it different? And what are your thoughts? Like, yeah,
I think. Here's another story I haven't really revealed much, and I'm not particularly proud of it. It's like, well, when I heard about Art Blocks, I listened to a podcast with Snowfro, and I thought, wow, this is my time. I've been waiting 25 years for this, right? I felt like I'm prepared for this. I've got everything in place, and I thought, finally, there's a home for what I've been doing. I could actually possibly sell this stuff, and I didn't even. And then I kind of like learned, oh shit, people on, you don't do the research. Well, I didn't, and I just heard, oh, people on Art Blocks, they're getting Art Blocks, they're millionaires. I didn't actually look at what things were selling for. I mean, that was the case in 2001, right? So I had this kind of I had this expectation. I thought, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do really well. And I sort of like, and so I built, I spent a few months developing Photon Stream off the back of some other stuff I've been doing, which explored like quasi crystals. This is the only project I ever did without SVG, actually, funny enough, but it was,
wow.
So it was,
there's the alpha. And then, everyone go get it.
So yeah, I mean, the project is like I spent more time developing that project than anything else because I didn't understand, I didn't have a sense of what long form generative art was at that point. I mean, like anybody else, it was a new thing. So I spent a lot of the time just working out, what the hell is it I'm trying to do here? And so it dropped, and it dropped at a really bad, like, gas. I think the day, like, on the launch, it was like 60, and it was, I mean, the market wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible, and it didn't sell out immediately. And I remember and the projects either side of it had sold out well and quickly, and so I had that kind of, and I had some good feedback on the project. People seemed to like it, although it was presents, it wasn't curated. So it was just like my expectation was too high, too lofty, and I was really gutted. Like, I was so gutted. Because I suddenly thought for the last 3 to 4 months, I thought I can finally quit my job and I can work full time as an artist. And it looked like I was only going to make, barely make minimum wage for the amount.
Yeah, I know. And
it's like, and then I had started to think, am I actually just not very good at this? Like, I had these thoughts. I'm like that person who goes on X Factor on the stage and thinks they're good at something and they're not.
Yeah.
Like, I never buried myself before, and I was totally devastated. So
I think you just that project. It's also too, which is interesting, is that there's movements in art, right? And there's 100% movements in even in art blocks.
Right.
And in this space, right? Like, just aesthetic movements, right? Like, and they happen so fast. It's funny, but right. I just think that project, if it was released at a different time, people would have ate it up. Like, it just was too different from what was being released beside it at that time, that people didn't really get it, that weren't looking at it critically, I think, or outside the context of that particular season of types of that aesthetic season in art blocks, right?
right, yeah, or whatever. But the thing is that I learned so much from that experience that I wouldn't have had it any other way. I think actually it's a disservice for an artist who's like just come on the scene to suddenly make like no artist in the traditional art world suddenly like has a show and makes millions of bucks, right? I don't think that really helps you. I don't think it gives you a good mind state for the rest of your career, because everything's going to be going down from there on, right? So it was like, I learned so much. And when there was 2 key things that happened. I was sort of gutted for a few, for like a week. I was just down, and then I think I got to turn this around. So I started to really hustle, and then that's when I created these X-rays, which were these kind of like set of,
those are so cool.
X-ray NFTs, which revealed more about the geometry and used the same hash. And I still think that's kind of like an innovation that people aren't like. They used the same hash that was used for the actual.
Yeah.
I mean, and then I started offer these for free if people bought on a certain day, and then if you bought by 3, I'm going to give you a free print. So I hustled the shit out of it, and it got it sold out. It sold out within a couple of weeks, which is okay actually. It's not bad at all, especially by the standards today. So, and then I kind of like the other thing I did, I started looking at people's wallets, because I was having to give. I just had to find whether they really owned them or not. And I started to look at the other stuff in their wallets. And in my mind, I thought, all these people on art blocks are these real art aficionados. And I start looking at these wallets. Shit, it's just full of PFP projects. And here I completely destroyed that these people didn't like my project. And they're buying cartoons. So I just realization that I put so much kind of like trust in the whole art blocks machine that somehow this was the pinnacle. And anyway, so it kind of gave me a reality check, and I thought, okay, this is, what do I do now? I'm going to do another project. And I stopped and I looked at everything that really worked well on art blocks, which had sold well. I looked at Fidenzas, I looked at Anti-Cyclone, I looked and I noticed there's this trend in kind of like, things that looked like, I call it trad realism at the time, things that looked like material, mediums from the past.
Yeah.
Selling well, right?
Skeuomorphic type stuff, right? Which is
skeuomorphic. Yeah. And I didn't like it. I wrote an essay about why I thought this was a bad idea, why we had this opportunity to create new visual language directly from the medium. We didn't have to like hold on to the past. But in the process of writing the essay, I convinced myself, I thought, well, actually have a go. Do what people, if people like it, let's have a go. So,
and people what they want.
Well, you know what? There's a moment there where I felt like, I think where I started to grow up as an artist. I worked in isolation for 25 years, just thinking about my integrity in me only, right? And I think that maturing as an artist is about understanding your audience.
Yeah.
And giving them what they want, but using that as something to be creative within. But
exactly. Yeah.
And you can be creative within any constraints. So,
well, it's like art is two-sided, right? It's not just it's not just the artist, right? It's the observer, right? It's the person that's actually, it doesn't exist without that person. So if considering that the observer is not being disingenuous to yourself, it's just part of the way art's experienced, right? Like,
right, yeah. And I think in Web3, the whole community aspect of it is something very new. So the community now has been turned into this part of my practice almost. Using the community as a resource, involving them in the evolution of my projects and work. It's like an indispensable part of the way of my. It's like another tool set. I mean, I don't want to make it sound like I'm using them, but I feel like I'm energized by the community that forms around my work, and I just feel like if I have I constantly kind of try to get ideas from the community because there's more kinds of, 100 minds are better than one, and periodically people come up with amazing inputs into my project. So, yeah, I just totally lost my train of thought.
No, it was great. I think, and I wanted to go back to just like, you really helped me a lot because, especially that first time in Marfa when I met you in person,
right.
If you remember, I was really struggling. I had, artistically and just, I was in the middle of a huge creative block after, I launched, Moments and Pieces of Me back to back in late 2021, which were huge successes.
Right.
It just, again, I just started my art career, like in Web3, right? I was just messing around before that. I wasn't releasing anything or selling anything. So it was such a shock to me, and, very thankful for that experience and what happened with those projects. And it was, I love them. But it just let me, to your point, it put me in this weird situation that it was like, how could I do anything else after that? Where do I even go from here, right? And especially Piece of Me, because I really liked that. I still love that project so much. It was like, I just don't know what to do next. It took me over a year to make anything or put anything out. And you were really helpful in Marfa when I first talked with you, and you were just like, you gotta keep going. You gotta put something out, out there. And, shortly after that, I did color streams of Bright Moments, and that kind of, got me back into it. But yeah, it was just like, you really helped me. And I think that advice of your, it coming from your, decades long of experience it was really, and you were even said, I think when, if I'm remembering back, you kind of said like, hey, this is the process, this is, everyone goes through this. This is not, just necessarily related to me as well. This is just kind of the natural evolution of an artist as well.
Right. Yeah, I remember that conversation clearly. Yeah, it was one of the most memorable conversations the whole Marfa experience that year. Yeah, that was great. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, and then you follow it up, with Photon Stream. You go back to the drawing board, and then you really have a success with Fontana. Fontana, is that how you pronounce it? It's Latin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say Fontana, but
yeah, Fontana. That's right.
Yeah.
Sounds right. We'll go with that. And you really had a success with that project, and I think it's an amazing project, and is in the will always be in the kind of curated seasons 1 through 8, right? Kind of series. And again, like I think you really embrace, like you're saying, like you it has skeuomorphic elements to it, but it's not skeuomorphic in its it's not completely. It definitely has a digital element to it and a feel to it, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It went back to the sort of like I started to use some of the geometric kind of systems I'd explored for for the last 25 years with that project. And I think in the course of like building that project and certainly like subsequent like Vellum, I realized actually the sort of like where like one of the things I kind of know for is like my stuff looks like it's kind of worn or faded, distressed.
Yeah, especially the edges.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
So what I realized is actually, if you've got a worn tabletop or anything, a worn tool or a piece of wood that's washed up on the beach, the processes that make those things look the way they do are algorithmic by nature. There are a certain range of movements or, processes that happen to it. And you end up with something. So sort of algorithmic art from algorithms naturally lends itself to making these similar type processes. And now I don't actually sit down to make something that looks like something from the real world, like looks worn. I just, I do a lot of layering and a lot of variation of every little movement, but they're all sort of like little things that like have certain constraints like you do in nature. And you end up with something that just naturally looks like it's worn and aged and kind of, so yeah, Fontana was like a movement back towards the geometry again, I guess. And it was my first SVG project. Yeah, looping back to that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's not something that like, I mean, Art Blocks already has this, that vector element to it just because it's like all the projects on Art Blocks have to be kind of resolution agnostic, but that's really one thing that's built in with the SVG, is that's, built in by kind of default, right? Is a benefit of that. You don't have to resize the browser window to a different size and refresh it to get a certain size, right? You just download that SVG and it's a scalable file, which is really cool. And I think generative art collectors know that and they really appreciate that. But I think, a lot of other collectors just in the crypto art space, I don't think they appreciate, how much, as far as prints and other things, like how much that really does matter.
Right.
And also future proofing, right? Like who knows what the resolution of the screens in the future will be, right?
Right. There you go. Yeah. I will actually say, like, Fontana, there is a very sort of, it's barely visible. There is a canvas layer, a bitmap layer, let's say, which provides a certain sort of paper texture. But a lot of the kind of wear marks and stuff, that's all SVG, especially all the detail around the edge. That's all SVG, and obviously the main fountains, let's say, that's all SVG. But there's a sort of very sort of transparent layer, which just gives another depth, layer of depth. And interestingly, what I found when I make big prints of these things, like obviously the SVG scales, but I actually just stretch those bitmaps because it preserves the noise. If I produce them at too high a resolution, the noise kind of like you get different quality in the noise, and it's not as it doesn't have a nice graininess. So all I do is kind of like just stretch it to fill the screen, and so far that solution's worked up to quite large prints.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's something I've done on all my works with this sort of paper texture kind of like layer on top. Apart from my current project doesn't do that, and I think Reticulum, it was all 100% SVG. Yeah.
So then you kind of move on from that and you go do another project, Vellum. You mentioned it before with Bright Moments, and we both have done things with Bright Moments and have minted live. And you came to my Color Streams launch in New York, and that was awesome for you and your wife to come to that. I really appreciated that. And so what do you think about live minting and minting with the collector live? versus kind of doing it virtually. Curious your experience and your take on that.
I think it's got a little more potential. With Vellum, I wanted to really emphasize the fact that the collector, I wanted them to really know that they were part of the process. So the moment, like, I was under the impression that actually, there would be some trigger that triggered the mint. And so, with generative art, this way, if you trigger it a millisecond later, it's going to be completely different. And so that moment is important, as part of the creation of the work, and to kind of like try to create a ceremony around this, so people really kind of like got the sense of that. We had this kind of like tent structure at the live minting, where people would go into this tent. It was like a quiet space, or as quiet as it could be, because the place was like a big party, so it was pretty loud. And it was like they were invited to give write a good intention, because I wanted people to like actually calm down and like be aware of what they were doing, and actually just have a positive state of mind. Because I've got this kind of like, I'm a kind of slight, whether it's kind of like what's the word, like I can't remember, but if it's, I don't know if there's any real hard science behind this, but I feel like when your mind is in a good place, you nearly always get better mints. I mean, there is some science around this. I can't remember what it's called now. So, like where sort of like mind states can affect like pseudo random outputs. Anyway, so that was the idea. People would write a good intention, put it in a basket, and then they would just sit there in silence for like 30 seconds or so, and then they would strike a bell, and that would trigger the mint. It wasn't quite like that for technical reasons, but that's what we wanted people to believe.
That's funny. And that's interesting, because this is brings another point that I'd love to just speak, a little bit about is your meditation practice. This is something you really, find value, it sounds like, from, and have been doing it for so long, which is kind of related. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that and what meditation has done for you, right, and continues to kind of do for you.
Right. It's quite a big story. Yeah. So I guess I have to go back to art school, because I started when I quit art school, and I was in this pretty dark space. I was pretty neurotic, and because I'd gotten so into my head. I mean, when I say that, I mean, this is an understatement. I was borderline mad. Like I was the stereotypical kind of like starving artist living in a squat, reading Dostoevsky and Nietzsche, and kind of like,
you're going down the nihilism path.
Yeah, and I remember I was sitting in a park one day, and a dog came up to me and like put his face in my, and I felt like a love for the dog, and I felt shit. I haven't felt this for a long time, for like a year, because I'd gotten so dark, and I thought, I can't remember the last time I laughed, like.
Yeah.
And I thought, and I knew a lot about this teacher who had this effect on me. He always used to talk about Buddhism, and I thought, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I understood like Buddhist perspective quite well, and I could argue it. But I knew that at some point that didn't mean anything, and that wasn't going to help me unless I actually put it into practice and like developed a meditation practice. So I went out and I bought a book. No, I tell you the first thing. I went out and bought a book on sacred geometry, and it had a quote in there, and it was like, I think I can still remember it. It was the last verse of this kind of famous Buddhist sort of like chant, and it was like, all in one in all. If only this is understood, then no more worry about being perfect. And it sunk into me, and I thought, whoever wrote that understands the world in a way that I want to understand it, and I felt like it came from a deep place that I just couldn't understand. And I picked up this book called The Three Pillars of Zen, which is written by a teacher from Rochester, which is where I live now, well, right near where I live now. And it was like a manual. It was probably at the time, the only manual in Zen Buddhism around, this kind of like deep dive into just very practical things like how, the posture and how to structure a daily practice. And I devoured this book. I read it without, like, I was a slow reader, and I read this book without putting it down. I was shaken because I had these accounts of people who had kind of like done this seriously, gone to monasteries in Japan, and they got this sort of like, they'd done these sort of like long retreats, and they'd had this they had this kind of like shift in their perspective, and they'd felt like fairly liberated. I thought, I want that, I can do this. So I became like, it became this huge thing for me. And that day I meditated for 3 hours, and then I quickly grew to like 5 hours every day. And that continued for a number of years, like just religiously. And I fucking hated it. Like, it was so painful physically, mentally. I felt like I was just going in, like, it was like being in a cauldron, just boiling off all these. But it was slowly it was slowly, I know, like, after about 6 months of that, I actually started to feel clear again. And like, I felt like I liked people again. And, I could have a conversation with somebody without getting into a fight. And it was slowly kind of like, but it wasn't like what I thought it was. It wasn't this big liberation moment or anything, but it was just slowly. And then, I eventually got to the point where I was making art, living in this, and then doing the day and meditating in the morning and evening, and that was and I went off, and I figured I'm going to go to a monastery, and I ended up going to Rochester to find this teacher who wasn't there. And then, anyway, I ended up spending 6 months just kind of like hitchhiking around America. And then I met my wife, and but still, meditating every day, meditating probably like 3-4 hours a day.
That's amazing.
Brought up kid, we had a family, still meditating. And then, like, it's just after about 12 years of doing that without like a group or a teacher or anything, I kind of just thought, oh, I've done this my whole life. What happens if I stop? I've done this my whole adult life. I wonder what would happen if I don't do it. Because I think I got to a point where I just got like stale, maybe. I think I was fairly solid. It helped with my creative process and everything, but I just didn't know what would happen if I stopped. And I stopped. And to be honest, for the first 6 months, I felt great. Like, I was, all of a sudden I had an extra 3 hours a day, right? So,
yeah.
But then slowly I kind of started to miss, and I started to notice I was getting angry on a regular basis, and kind of like depressed, and I'd never really been depressed before. And I felt like empty. And so I started meditating again, but this time I actually like swallowed my pride, and I started going to a group.
Yeah.
And the pride wasn't really a pride thing. It was more like I knew what these people did. They went on these long retreats, and that was, I didn't believe, I wasn't sure if I could do it or not, because that was just so hard.
Yeah.
So I joined the group, and it just all like blossomed. It opened up for me in like a big way for a number of years. And I felt, and now I've got to say, like, since I started Web3, it's gone to shit, because I still meditate. Like, I meditated this morning because I knew you might bring it up, and I thought I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't. But like, I go through periods now. I go through periods now, like 2 or 3 weeks where I don't, and then I might meditate every day for a month, and then but it's because I'm doing something I've wanted to do for so long. I've got so much energy to do this. It's so hard for me to stop. But I do feel like I do notice when I don't do it, But yeah, it's been a big, important part of my life, and it's like, one thing I noticed this morning, like, there's as soon as I sit down, there's certain key problems I've been working on for a number of, or doubts I've had for a number of days or weeks, suddenly just become clarified. I'm not thinking about them, but suddenly I can just, everything kind of like settles down, and in that calm, things that you thought were problems just aren't anymore, and you get sort of like a space around the whole. I get a perspective on the whole thing that I'm doing. All of a sudden, Chatfucker and all this crazy madness with all the DJs and everything, it's still there, it's still real, but there's a big space around it, and it doesn't feel so like desperately kind of like important.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what it brings.
That's great.
I think a perspective. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like because this space, can be very everything. Being an artist in this space could definitely be stressful, for sure. That's probably an understatement. Things move so quickly, and it's just, it seems like, you can't waste an hour around here, or else, it's, you're not going to get, your art out there, sometimes, or for people like us, it's someone's gonna do it, that you have in your brain, and now I'm gonna have to start all over. It's like I can't release anything other people have done.
Yeah,
I'm sure you feel the same way. Yeah. So yeah, now I love to just transition to talk about Chatfucker, which I love saying, which is awesome. And so let's talk about, this is an ordinals drop, correct? So, this is something this is going to be your first drop on ordinals. I personally haven't collected anything on ordinals. I was telling you that, and I would love this to be my first, and to figure it out, to start collecting over there. But what do you think about kind of ordinals, Bitcoin? Are you a chain maxi, or are you kind of just you're open to like release on any chain, or what do you think on that?
No, I feel like if anything, I'm an art maxi. So like the chain is just kind of a tool.
Yeah.
And to be honest, the whole Chatfucker started with the idea of, okay, I produce a lot of work. I'm going to do something under a pseudonym. That was the thought process. And then when I started to think that way, I suddenly felt quite liberated. I thought, well, I can do anything, I may as well just have a fresh start and try a different chain, so it would knock people off the scent. and the other thing is, like, I figured, well, there's some paintings I made when I was 17, which I really like, but I've never explored again because I kind of feel like they're childish. So, these kind of like disembodied heads which are screaming, in agony or despair. And I always liked them, but I just didn't ever have a way to kind of like re-explore them with the type of art I was making. So I figured, well, I wonder if I can explore that with the generative approach. So that was that. And then I started to look at the different chains available, and I looked at Solana, and there was nothing really technically that kind of interested me there. And then I looked at ordinals, and I'm like, okay, if at that point I figured I'm building a PFP project here. It was like a surprise to me, like I'm building a project about PFP culture, and shit, I actually can make a PFP project myself. So, and the way I was building it, I was building all the, each trait is a different algorithm. And I figured, well, you've got this thing in ordinals called, like recursion, which you can easily reference other things that are inscribed. And it just suited the way I was building the project, because I wanted to build it in such a way that other people in the future, if they come along and they make an SVG generative PFP project, they can reference my traits and use them easily. So like, if I build a pair of noggles, or, like the way I build my hands or anything like that, or a handbag or whatever it be, they can easily sort of import that into their code and reference it. And the reason I like that is I think that in the future, in 10 years' time, or whatever, we'll be able to look at projects and see what projects reference other projects. And I think it kind of will just add to the provenance of Chatfucker if there's a bunch of other projects that reference it, like a scientific white paper,
Yeah, it's like a graph, I've just started using like Logseek, and I've been looking at these. I don't know if you've used any note-taking kind of applications that's come out the last couple of years of Obsidian, and like you make notes and then you tag other notes, and then you can go to this graph view and it shows all the interconnections, right?
Right.
It's kind of what it is. That's really cool. I did not know that about ordinals, and this is making me want to release a project over there. That's actually really cool that you can reference other inscriptions and things like that.
And it's just like an HTML reference. It's so simple. The other thing I liked about ordinals is just there's no smart contract. It's just raw basic. You can interact with the blockchain in a very direct, simple way. It's very lean. I know there's probably some other downsides, but from that standpoint, it's great.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, I think I've been feeling this way too, like with my Dots project and kind of where I'm going with that ecosystem. And like one thing I've noticed you kind of doing with this project is, one, you're like leveling up the community involvement, right? Like part of the art in this release, right, is very community related, right? Which is what the PFP projects are. And I think it's interesting at the beginning of your entrance, and I was in the similar boat to kind of Web3 and crypto art. There was this kind of divide, right? And maybe it's still there of okay, there's degen side of Web3 or crypto art on the PFP side, and then there is this fine art side, which is just kind of people in art blocks and collecting super rare and things like that. And it's kind of like there's completely different cultures and, people, it's like almost like two camps. And yeah. I felt recently that, like, at least in my own, it seems like yours as well, is that, like, it's kind of pretentious to kind of like, for a lot of us people that were in art, to kind of make that kind of almost looking down on like PFP culture and the degens, right? And not realizing that, that's part of art as well, almost, if you would agree with me. But like, that the degen culture is part of the human experience as well, right?
It's a real phenomenon that's happened. We know that, right? And I had a moment where I suddenly realized, shit, this could be the subject I've been looking for. Because, with generative art, when it's hard to find a really meaningful subject, right? And the way I'm looking at it now, it's like, this is a commentary on that space. And it's also made from the space, if you know what I mean. It's like, it is a fully baked PFP project. I like to think of it as the intersection between PFP culture and fine art,
Yeah.
And ironically, I think that in going full on degen with this project, out of everything I've done, actually has the potential to be of interest to the trad art world more than anything else I've done, because it is a project that's clearly like a commentary on a part of society, and that's kind of like important in art.
Exactly. So, and I think it's like, it's a genuine part. We just see it. It comes up time and time again. With this, people, whether it's taking on a lot of risk and getting a lot of gains, and just this commentary on this, financial aspect of the space. I think it's genius. I think it's really cool, like that. You can look, I think, like I said, like I kind of feel bad, like myself, for the way I looked at it when I entered the space of the kind of two camps, and looking down on, why would people be like, trading these PFP projects, and like they're and to be honest, I kind of look down on it, and I'm like, some of these are kind of like clip art. Like, it's like, right. It's not, it's people are not really engaging with it or valuing it based on the art. They're just they're valuing on it of how much money they can make. And I kind of look down on that, but I kind of have come around to that. Wait a second. Like, this is a whole, like, it's a whole culture, and there's really something here on the degen side that's saying something about us, and about not only the space, but also about all of us, and like what drives us, right?
Totally, yeah. I mean, I was also guilty of that. I felt the same. I thought, what's all these fucking cartoons? Like. Yeah. But at some point, it's like one thing I've like from doing this project. Degens know how to build community, and they understand community in a way 100%. That maybe we should. So, and they do it well. And the other thing I love is just this self kind of referential kind of spirit of like, just, I think this is something that we all crave, that we can just take the piss and be outrageous, and degens just do this. This is part of that meme culture. I absolutely love it, and I think this whole project is kind of like is liberating for me. It's because it's enabled me to express a side of my personality I don't normally share through my art. It's all of a sudden it's like giving me permission to not be deadly serious, and yet it's kind of it's added depth. I feel like, okay, I'm now thinking about these characters, and there's so much more than just making, thinking about the visuals. I'm having to think of, like, I made this sheet fucker And all of a sudden, I'm in this sort of like debate about, how do I do I make this grotesque sort of caricature of a female DJ? And am I the person to do this? How do feel about this? I want to make something that actually like is really like for women and men, but I felt kind of shy about going there. So I actually set up a channel in my Discord called She Fuckers and invited female, women to help me kind of like guide me through the process and help me kind of like build a better PFP project for women. Because this is like, I feel strongly that PFP Gen Art world is not fully mature until we've got like 50-50 split of men and women and whatever.
Shout out to women, International Women's Day. We should definitely shout that out and, appreciate y'all being in here and to contributing to this space.
Yeah, at some point we have to like the PFP thing will evolve beyond like 90% of men in like either traders or guys in basements.
Yeah,
it's going to become far richer than that. I think far more evolved and just balanced, in terms of yin and yang.
For sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's so interesting and I don't even know this. Like, do you have some final details of like when this is going to be released or what what you're thinking about on that front?
Yeah, I do. So my dog. So yeah, the things I can share are like there's going to be a maximum supply of 6942. It was originally going to be 10,000, but again, it's just everything in this project I want to be a reference to the culture.
Yeah, of course.
And that's just a maximum. It maybe end up being smaller than that, but so I'm going to drop the project in batches of like 690. That's the target number for the first batch. And I'm doing it that way because there's so much work involved in building the traits. And if I want the variety to, for the final supply to be completely epic. So it's going to take me probably a year to build all those different layers, these different characters and traits. So I'm doing it in batches, and in between each batch, I'm going to, have the community help me decide what the next themes are going to be, the next traits, and so forth, and involve them in that way. Some batches may be small. I may do in real life, events if I get an opportunity, where I say drops, say 30 or 20 special mints that night or something like that. So again, this is the way to kind of keep the community involved. The price point is going to be super accessible, and I'm going to keep some of the supply. I was originally thinking of keeping 10%, but then I realized that's just way too much. I don't need that much. So now I'm thinking I'm actually going to split. I'm going to keep some supply, and I'm going to split it into thirds. And a third is I'm going to keep personally. A third is going to go to some designated special cause. I don't know what that will be, but maybe the community can help me decide on something that's kind of meaningful for the whole, the whole community. And then a third, I'm going to
keep what you ask for. It may go into some meme coin.
Right. Now it's going to be.
Yeah.
Gotta help
like shitcoin 15 or something. I don't even know. I don't know what the names are going to be coming out. What's the next shitcoin name? I have no idea. They're pretty creative.
Right. You go. But it's going to be some charity or something, and then a third of that supply will be fed back to like funding events and paying for like free drinks and stuff for parties and stuff. So that's my current plan. What else can we say? And I hope to get the first batch out. I'm hoping to get it out before NFT NYC, just mainly so I can enjoy myself and relax. Whether it's kind of like trying to hustle and get it done, because that's like a highlight of the year. But it's possible that won't happen before then. But I'm getting pretty close. I'm making good progress. It slowed me down a whole bunch because I'm just getting like 10 DMs an hour from people wanting to do collabs, which is another thing that you don't get in Gen Art world,
Yeah.
Oh my word, it's crazy. But I've got some help now. I've got somebody helping me with that.
Great.
Yeah, I'm realizing this is going to have to be like a team effort because I can't do this alone.
For sure. Yeah. I've realized that more and more, like, and I think like I was talking to, I think you met my brother Brett, but I was talking to him maybe a couple weeks ago, and I was like, during the Dots launch and me, because with that as well, I kind of just did everything, and I built the site, and I built the smart, Dave from who I used to work with at Proof, Dave Hewer helped me with the, the smart contract part, but everything else I just did myself,
right.
Which was just like a lot, just like so much stuff to just get it out there, and I'm still building it, but it's like, I want to focus on the art. I don't want to like do all this other stuff that, I can do. Yeah. But it's not the best use of my time, probably. It'd be better to kind of get some help with those stuff so I can put more time in the art and things like that. I'm sure you're running up against that same problem.
Yeah, I think it's common for Web3 artists to kind of like, but again, I think the solution for me is like, A, find some help, right, for the things that you're not good at, and B, find a way to deal with, because we have to wear a lot of hats, right? Find a way to wear the hats which work for you personally, which work for your practice. So, and if there's certain things that really don't work well for you, then just don't, just cut them out. You don't have to tick all the boxes. You don't have to, you can find your own path, you don't have to. So
I think it's too that, I completely came around to this, like, because at first, like when I entered the space, I still feel like this now, like to a degree, is that, I want to do everything because I'm the artist, and this romantic notion of like, I don't want anyone else like being involved in the process because I want my hands on everything because it's all the art. And then I kind of like, when I got into art, I looked around and I said, I see these artists that have these teams and things like that. And especially in the traditional art world, like, the Jeff Koons and, Damien Hirst, and they have whole studios, like, and they're not doing the actual painting. It's like someone else, right? Which I would just look down and I was like, oh man, I would never do that. Like, I would do everything myself. But I think what I've realized more and more is that, like, and the same thing goes back to like Da Vinci, like Da Vinci was worked in someone else's shop, and then when he got more well known, he had assistants. So it's just, I think sometimes in order to like really do ambitious things, you have to have help, right? And that's just a reality of it. As you can imagine, like if people were making movies, right, and there was just a director with his iPhone, like. Or with a camera, like, and there was no crew or anything like that, it'd be a pretty crappy movie. Like, even doesn't matter how good the director is, right? Like, it takes sometimes to really do things that are ambitious and at a scale. It takes a team, right? And it sometimes you kind of, at least I have to remind myself to get away from that romantic notion of like, the artist should be doing everything, the artist can direct, and do the creative direction. I still think, it's that's still their art, and but I think they definitely should give credit to the people that are helping them. But
you described the story of my life in a sense, because I've always been really resourceful. I've always fixed my own cars, probably build my own house and everything. And it pains me to like, I sometimes fix my own car. I mean, I can afford to get it fixed, right? But I just hate, I hate it. So I'm slowly learning. Like Martha Mesh was big for me with that, because I had to work with a team for that. Obviously I was in the throes of Quasi Dragon Studies, and again I had to work with a team for that. So I'm learning slowly to delegate. It's difficult for me, but I slowly I'm sort of like getting people I like working with and trust and and I think it's part of my life lesson to learn to delegate and help other people maybe find their kind of help them find what they do well.
100%. I think and I'm at that stage now too, where I'm 100% like you, where my instinct is just to do everything myself, right? And
Right.
I actually enjoy doing that, but I think you just get to a point you realize that, wait a second, like I can't, if I do it all myself, I can't accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish. I can't get the art, whatever it is, out there to the world in the form that I want to present it to the world, right?
Right.
It's just not possible. So at first it's like, it's not possible while staying sane. But then, if you have grander ideas, it's like not possible, period. So never mind staying sane while doing it. So I think delegation is just like something that I think like people learn, and entrepreneurs learn this as well, obviously, but it's not an easy task to transition, right? Which I'm sure you're finding out as well.
Well, it's just a challenge every time, but it's also really rewarding as well, right? To actually work, for me, like to work in a team, and when it's going well, it's nothing better, really. It feels
it's also like people want to be part of a team, and like especially if someone wants to learn generative art, or they're things like that, or they want to learn art, like being a part of a team, you're helping them too, right? You're giving them, it's almost an apprenticeship, right? Like that has existed for a very long time, right? And that concept, so it's really cool.
I actually feel like, I mean, I haven't done a lot of it, but there's been, I get quite a few artists like will DM me and ask me to look at their work or whatever and help them with whatever, just because I've been on art blocks or whatever. And sometimes I just don't have the time to really say much meaningful. But there's a few artists I've kind of like felt like I've worked with a little bit, and it's not like I'm telling them what to do. It's more like trying to kind of like give them the confidence to like try something which they wouldn't normally. Like you can get really safe even with code. It's amazing, right? You can copy and paste the file and open it up and start again. But people get really sort of like, and including myself, protective about what they've done, and they can't take that leap. So like I found it really satisfying to help artists, like maybe just challenge them or just just invite them to take another leap, and to sort of like jump into the unknown, because I think it comes, that confidence to do that comes from, like, it does come from experience. It comes from having done it loads of times and knowing that you're not gonna die when you try, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Like that's something I've 100% learned is like, you got to be putting stuff out there, and like even if you put something out there that doesn't hit, you get another chance, right? You get to keep going, right? And so you can't be so protective of putting out there, because being an artist, you're eventually going to miss. Like that's just part of it, right?
Of course you are. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're afraid of missing, like that, like you shouldn't put anything out there, really, right? Or something, it's going to be really hard to, but you're eventually going to miss. So you just got to keep going.
I mean, like a 10% strike rate. If you get 1 in every 10 projects really work well, then I think you're doing well. It's it's fine to me.
Well, do you want to open it up to some audience members coming up? What do you think?
Yeah, sure. If people have got questions, I'm happy to try.
A great conversation, I think, but I think let's open it up. If anybody wants to come up and ask Harvey a question or chat, please just request, and I'll start bringing people up.
I'm just glad there's people still listening. I mean, we'll go.
It doesn't feel like it's been that long, like it's just,
Yeah.
It's great.
To be honest, I kind of forgot that we're on a call. Like it feels just. I kind of got in the mindset where it's just you and I talking.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see if I can bring people up here. Looks like Dolly, you're up here. What's up? I think you can speak if you unmute. call him once. Can you speak or no? You just accidentally hit the button.
Anyway,
all right, you're out of here. Who else wants to come up and ask questions? Don't all jump. If not, then we can just keep talking for a couple more minutes. But I do, while we're waiting, I do have like a question. Is we talked about advice for artists and people that are kind of new to generative art or just art in general. Do you have any like other advice that you think is pertinent, that you give out often or you feel like would be valuable?
Yeah, well, the thing I always circle back to is like every artist is different, and this whole part of your practice really is about finding your own pathway, do your own way to navigate this, and finding a way to be creative. But all the different hats we have to wear as Web3 artists. You got to be your own promoter and all that stuff. You got to find a way to do it in a way that you enjoy. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. So it might be that you like to share your work, your work in progress, but you don't like to do something else. Promote yourself. Like I personally like to do that, so I do it. I just do it on a regular basis. So this I would also recommend looking at the past and just again, it's sort of like falling in love with art, the whole history of art, and you get a different sort of like sense of quality. I also like to read biographies of artists, and people who have creatives, not just artists, but like composers and so forth. I find that.
What biography would you recommend?
Oh shit! You got to read. You got to start with the agony and the ecstasy. It's Michelangelo.
Ecstasy, Michelangelo. I haven't read that. I got it. That's gonna go on the list.
Yeah, it's one of the first books I ever read. Like it was. It was so like. But you like, in terms of like a creative force, this like the pinnacle of creativity. He sets the bar so high. In terms of like his endurance. And his kind of like commitment to like his craft, he takes it to like an insane level. So yeah, and the book is just beautifully written. So I don't know, yeah, like reading Van Gogh's letters is like beautiful. You get a different sense for him as a human being. I thought they were really touching, and the sort of struggles he went through. Yeah, that was. Recommend them. The other thing I heard the other day, like I listened to Tyler Hobbs podcast, and somebody told Tyler, and I don't remember who it was, they told him to make the art that only he can make. And I loved that. And that was partly when I was thinking about Chatfucker, I kept thinking about that. I thought, well, like there's not many people who do SVG, or hardly any at all. Like this project, I'm not worried about people copying it, because it's like it brings together so many things that probably only I do, and it's just unique. It's just a weird kind of expression of me, like all the. So like it seems like that's the project for me right now. It's the right project for me. I'm not trying to. I don't. I find it quite liberating because I'm not comparing it against anything. And it feels like I'm so confident that this is the right thing for me to do right now. I don't even care if it sells or not. It probably couldn't, but like, it just like I don't feel that pressure like I have with other projects. I always feel it's got to sell. If it doesn't sell well, I'm going to be rejected and blah blah blah. But with this, it's like no, this is. I know this is good work. I know this is my best work for me right now, and it's kind of like a culmination of everything I've done. Who cares how people think about it, So that would be a nice little thing to remember. Make the work that only you can make. But I mean that's an easy thing to say. I guess sometimes it takes a few years to actually find that. I guess that would be another piece of advice. Be patient. It took me 25 years before I sold a piece. Keep at it.
Yeah.
Make it your priority, find time every day. Work. Inspiration is, I think it's just a habit, regular work. If you keep doing it, then you won't have dry spells. If you just do one thing a day, keep just one little thing a day, you'll always have something to go back to the next day.
It's so much about confidence too, right? Like
Totally. Yeah.
it's just having confidence in your vision and in what comes to your head, right? Like I think
Yeah.
any artist, you know what that muse is, and sometimes you get over. Sometimes you just, if you're not in the right headspace, you're not confident, that creative thought, you kind of say, oh, that's stupid, or like, oh, someone's already
Right.
done that before, or if you're not in the right headspace, and it comes back to that meditation of what you were talking about, of if it really is that your state is kind of like can either enable you to be creative, or it can really stifle that creativity, and you'll kind of just downplay it, or you won't really get excited about it, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think actually that confidence is contagious. So if you spend time with other artists,
Yeah.
you can feed off their confidence, right? You get. I think it's actually something I think about a lot. I've always had quite a lot of confidence to try and fix things, and I think it's because I grew up with a dad who fixed everything. I think he's probably like so I grew up just thinking, well, it's possible to fix stuff yourself or do stuff yourself, and so if you surround yourself with people who are doing stuff and getting stuff done,
Yeah.
it kind of like you absorb it through osmosis, right? So that's another piece of advice. I started off saying I didn't have any, but it seems like I've got a
Yeah,
lot.
no, 100%. Yeah, like there's a lot of quotes of, I've heard this quote. I don't know who exactly it was from originally, but it's like you're the average of the 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? And it's incredibly hard to be around people and not get influenced by them, right? If you're around them on a regular basis. So it's important to surround yourself kind of with people that are pushing you in the direction you want to go, but also too, like the people that challenge you as well, right? That are rounding you out, right, and not letting you just run in your kind of direction you want to run in. And that sometimes that friction of it actually creates creativity, because you have that constraint, and you're saying, oh, I have to do it. We both have families and things like that, and I know that families take a lot of time, and sometimes I'm sure you've experienced this well, where it's like you don't have a lot of time, and you're like, oh, I really have this ambitious idea, but oh, I don't have time for that because I have a family and I need to get stuff on that. But I have found that in those situations, sometimes it's like something that's really helpful is to just think like, okay, how much time do I have, and what's a creative way to like accomplish what I want to accomplish in that time, right? Like it's kind of, you're working backwards, if that makes sense, of like in getting really creative to like kind of accomplish the most in the time you have, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If it's like, I always think like an alcoholic always finds time to drink, right? They make time. If it's important, if it's really important, you make the time. You use the downtime you have efficiently. Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of fortunate now. I'm like, it's a grown up. I'm a granddad now, actually. So, I don't have to look after them anymore or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I can work long hours, and my wife doesn't mind me doing that. She's always, we both work at home, so we're always sort of seeing each other, several times a day. So she's into the whole thing, so
It's great. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think maybe before we part, if anybody, wants to come up, but if not, then, I guess, where could people find you, find out about the project, that kind of thing?
Right. So yeah, obviously, like, follow me on Twitter. I post regularly on Twitter every day, and I always announce things well ahead. My Discord, Harvey Rayner, just got over 1,000 members today. So it's mostly like an influx of DJs for Chat Pocket.
Yes.
But it's been pretty active in there. It's like been fun.
I've been lurking, and I responded today. It's definitely getting active. So I definitely recommend people get in there. It's fun for sure.
Yeah. and that's something I enjoy. This is something I found, which again, it's like finding things that work for you, which you enjoy. So I enjoy being in there and sharing memes and stuff. And I have my website is pan.co. It's pretty comprehensive, although I haven't updated it in like 3 months, so it doesn't even have chat fuckers on there. But it's got a lot of work on there from going back like 25 years. Although it's the way I display it, I went for a period where I like displaying it randomly, so it's not like in chronological order. But if you hover over you go to the gallery and hover over the images, you'll actually see the dates. And then there's all my generators on there from past projects, and I kind of archive them so people can go back in time and see how the algorithm evolved. So that's the main places to give me. I just opened a Filecaster account last night, so you can find me there as well.
I think I just followed you on there, or also
okay.
I tagged you in the post about this space, but I think I followed you, but I'll make sure I follow you there as well.
I'm still working all out.
yeah. It's interesting. Well, this has been amazing. It's been a great I think. Oh yeah, we how do you want to give away the allow list spots?
So, do you have a way to see who's on the call?
Well, I think what we can do is I can, because it's recorded, we can go and we can look at who was here.
As long as we're sure, you can definitely access that. So yeah, I was going to give away 20 for every interaction I do with the community. I give away 20 spots. So I mean, I don't know how many is on the call. If there's less than 20, then we'll have some left over.
Yeah, if there's a little bit. How many are there? It looks like there's near 20. So,
okay, well.
Let's do the people that have stuck around first. I'm taking screenshots, and we'll see how many we have, and then if we need to do a draw of who's in the room, we will, and then we can kind of just like make a post maybe with this space and just announce the winners. How does that sound?
Okay. Right. Cool. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. Well. Hey. Cool. Nice.
This has been awesome, Harvey. Would love to do it again sometime. I feel like we could talk another hour and a half about philosophy and art, and I feel like we're just getting started. But we'll see if we room too.
Do another one in a few months or whatever. But yeah, okay, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Definitely. And everyone, thanks for tuning in. Harvey's new project that's coming out is Chatfucker. It's it's awesome. I encourage you all to check out his channels and join his Discord and check out the outputs, which are just really cool. And it's really something that I haven't seen in the PFP space, of really this mashup between serious Gen R and this PFP kind of culture and degen culture, which is really cool. So I'm looking forward to it. And thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being the first guest on this new show that I'm doing. And I'm really looking forward to kind of interviewing artists around the space and a lot of my friends and having them up here. And thanks for everyone listening for joining in and going on this journey with us. So thanks a lot. Thanks, Ari.
Okay, great job, man. See you.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Take care.